And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Ryan Metzler.
Hey everyone, it's Ryan Metzler here again, and today we're going to take a look at a small little card game by Sierra Madre Games by designer Phil Ekland. Now, Phil Ekland is known for making very complex games. He's behind High Frontier and Bios Megafauna. So it's interesting to see a small card game from him, although it is a very complex small card game with a lot of different interactions and a lot of different rules. I've already filmed the review portion of it. I will let you know that it's probably very convoluted, very detailed in some areas and very brief in others, but that there's a lot going on here. You're not going to be able to get it all from a review. I suggest you read the rules, but real quick we'll take a look at what you do get inside the box, and a little bit of how the game plays, the general concepts at least, and some details on cards, and then we'll come back here and we'll get my final thoughts on Pax Porfiriana. Okay, so I'm going to structure this review somewhat differently than most of my other reviews, and the reason is there's a lot going on in this game, and I'm not sure I'm going to be able to cover it all, but what I do want to do is give you a good representation of what kinds of cards you're going to find in this game. Pax Porfiriana is a tableau-style game where players will have their own area in front of them, where they're going to be taking cards from their hands, buying cards from a market, and playing those cards out in front of them, or in front of their opponent to harm them, in order to accomplish the point of getting different victory points. Now, in this game, there are 4 different types of victory points, and only one of those is going to let you win at any certain time. In addition, if nobody wins by the end of the game when the deck runs out, the game is going to be won by whoever has the most money. So there'll be 4 different events where you can potentially win the game by having the right victory points, and at the end of the game, if nobody wins through those methods, someone will win based on money. Now, those 4 different types of victory points are going to be found on many different types of cards. For example, we have a command victory point. Victory points are this oval at the top. You can see one on this card. There are also going to be things like outrage victory points. This one here you can see is written upside down. That's because this is a card that will affect someone else, and whoever's affected by this card is going to get that victory point. So sometimes using a card on your enemy will give them victory points. The same thing you can see here for a revolution victory point. It's upside down, which means that the victim of this card is going to get the victory point. And we have loyalty. So there are the 4 different types of victory points that you can get throughout the game, and at certain types having the right victory point may win the game for you. Now, in these cards here you can see all of the different types of cards I've set out. Up here we have the Hacendado cards. Now, these are going to be the representation of the players themselves. Each player is going to have one of these cards, and it describes who this person is in Mexico at the time. During the game, they're going to provide you with income. Each Hacendado card provides you with 2 income per turn while he's on this side of his card. But at some points during the game, during Revolution, or if you want to have some other things happen, you can flip this card over. And so during a toppling, I guess I should say, not during Revolution, during a toppling, you can flip them over and they can choose an allegiance. So you can see here, I can flip him to this side and he'll be a command point, or I can flip him to the other side and he becomes a revolution point and has another ability. He has a boot here on him, which is his travel type, if troops want to go there, or a train on the other side if troops want to go and help him, as his private army. And all of these guys are going to have different allegiances when you flip them over and give you different points. Now, on top of that, we have what are called enterprises, and there's all kinds of different enterprises. These are going to be more things that give you money. They're essentially businesses. But you'll see they can also potentially give you victory points. This one here has a victim awarded, well, not technically victim awarded, but a revolt awarded victory point here. If you manage to free the slaves from this plantation, you get this victory point. It provides 2 income, costs 6 money to play, and as I said, if you free the slaves, it's going to give you a victory point. You free the slaves by putting unrest markers on it, which I'll talk about later. There are also enterprises that do different things. So, for example, this one here provides you with 1 income, but in addition to that, it has this type of travel on it. It normally takes a boot to travel there, and you have to pay the appropriate cost for your troops. But it has this thing up here. You can upgrade it by paying 10 money, and it gives you this train with a chain behind it. So it becomes a train travel, and any of your connections that you build from that point on are super cheap because you have this gold chain. You also have things like the mine, which have a similar connection upgrade. It costs 9 to play, but gives you income based on the current government's economy, or the current government's mine status, which is going to be 2. So this would have 2 income cubes on it and provide you 2 income each round. There's things like a gun store, which when somebody plays an event against you or against anyone else, you're going to earn money for having this gun store. And so forth and so on. There's several different things. There's ranches like this, and ranches and plantations can be upgraded to provide you more income. So those are the enterprise cards. You also have things like troops, which look like this. Troops have these connections at the bottom, which tell you how much they cost to play to enterprises or to your Hacendado that has a similar connection. So this one can be played to a train for 2 money, or to a horse for 6 money, or to a foot for 8 money. And it tells you at the top that this is a kind of like an automatic gun type troop. It's got three little dots at the top left here. That's the power of this troop. And this troop is a U.S. troop as indicated by the color and at the top. In addition, when you play a troop like this one, it shows you here that there's a regime change when you play this out to the table, and this is going to switch to the U.S. intervention government. So this government here would switch to U.S. intervention, and the victory condition would change. So based on what government we're in, the victory condition is going to change. The reason you play troops is either to attack your opponent's enterprises or to protect your own enterprises in order to try and steal money from them or prevent them from getting money, and or prevent them from taking money from you. You also have things like partner cards, which are generally cards that go out in front of you and provide you with some benefit. So for example, this one says when you have this card in play, which you put it into play by paying the money at the top right, you may redeploy troops for 0 cost. So you can move your troops from one place to another for free. And you'll see that these have victory points on them as well. This one's a revolution victory point. You also have one here. If this one is in play, all of your troops have a 3 firepower. So 3 is the most powerful firepower. That makes all of your troops a 3. So troops may have victory points on them and give you effects. We're going to skip those for right now. And these. We're going to come to these. These are orange cards. These are event cards. And these are also going to have a lot of those points that are awarded to whoever is affected by them. So I showed you one of these earlier, but this one is going to switch the government to anarchy. And in addition, it's going to target an enterprise. And you see these numbers at the top left-hand corner here. That 4 means you'll put 4 unrest on the target enterprise. That's a lot. And you're going to get 3 money from the person who's targeted by this card. Now, if you target yourself, which is a possibility, not only would you not lose the money, you would place the unrest, but you're also going to get the outrage point. So there's a reason to target yourself at times. Unrest, when placed on an enterprise, if it exceeds the amount of income on that card, it's going to destroy the card and put it back into the player's hand, and that kind of sets them back a little bit. We also have these kind of blackish blue cards here, and these are going to be events as well. They have a cost to play, and a cost, and then they have an effect. And usually these cards take 2 actions to play, but it depends on what regime or what government you're currently in. You'll see this one says that it's 2 actions unless you're in the anarchy regime. And this one here says that you can steal an opponent's non-U.S. troop into your hand. So if they have a troop out somewhere, be it on your area or on their area, you can steal it into your hand. And these all have different effects on them that cost more to do usually unless you play them at the right time of the game. Now, like I said, a lot of these cards are going to be based on what regime you're currently in, or what of these different types of governments you're in. So you start in the Pax Porfiriana one. And this one has a relatively good economy, and anybody who has any loyalty points is going to get a cube of income on their cards. Now, these governments are going to change based on the play of several cards, some of which will be event cards, which are these yellow ones here. You can see that these cards are 2-sided and they have different things on them. One side is going to be a status quo, which will do nothing when played, but the other side has some type of event. For example, it switches the regime to Pax Porfiriana and puts into play a strife, which means that if you have both white and green cards, you can only keep one of the 2 types. You're going to have to get rid of one of the 2, all of them, and keep the other one. In addition, it says that you have a thing here that says adapt to export market. All plantations are going to gain 1 cube on them, which is going to be more income for whoever has plantations. And there are several different events like this. In addition to that, you can see on these that they have a bull in the corner of this one or a bear in the corner of this one, which is going to shift the market to either a non-depression or into a depression if it's a bear market. 2 bears in a row are going to put you into a depression if there's 2 bear events played in a row. And that will reduce all of the economies to a much poorer economy and force you to pay costs for your cards that you have in play. So you'll see here, the mine income goes from 2 to 0, and the economy goes from 3 to 0. And in addition, each round you're going to have to pay for every card you have in play or lose it. Now, the last type of card we have here are topple cards, and there's going to be 4 of these in the game. When these come out and when they're bought from the market and used, they will be played immediately, and they're going to topple the current regime. So you'll see here, we have things like this one. It topples the current regime, which means we flip this regime to its opposite side. And on here it says Diaz retirement. You win if you have the most loyalty or more loyalty than the tripartite. Now the tripartite is going to be 2 points for this card itself, and then the combined points of your 2 weakest enemies in that victory point. So for example, if this card were 2 and your 2 weakest enemies had 0 and 1 loyalty points apiece, you would have to beat 3 victory points. And if you have 3 loyalty points, you're going to be the winner. If not, this card will get discarded, set aside, and you'll continue on the game. Now, you'll also note that there's a regime change on these. So the regime change, or it says here if it's an anarchy regime, you get some bonus points, but you topple that government, and you'll see if there's a winner. If not, it stays up, and it'll change later in the game. And so that one is loyalty, Pax Porfiriana. You also have the U.S. intervention. When that one shifts, it's going to be whoever has the most outrage points, so if that's toppled. You have anarchy, and if you have anarchy, whoever has the most revolution points over the triplet of people, the card itself, and the 2 lowest. And you have the martial law, which is based on command points, so whoever manages to beat the tripartite with command points. So those are the cards in the games, and now you can see that there's a lot going on. Real quick, we're going to go and take a look at how the game plays, and then I'll go and give you my final thoughts. So here you can see the setup for Pax Porfiriana. Now this is set up for 2 players. You can see the green player here and the yellow player here. The green player starts with 2 cubes on their hacendado and 4 money, and the yellow player is going to start with 2 cubes on their hacendado, and they start with 5 money. Now I'm going to move the yellow player off to the side because we don't need to see them, but basically know that they would be on a different part of the table building their own tableau. Now, these green cubes are income, but at the start of the game, you start with your money and you don't get income until the end of your first turn. On your turn, you're going to do what is basically taking actions. So, at the start of your turn, you're going to get to take 3 actions. Each turn, you get 3 actions. Actions are many and varied. Now, the first thing you can do for an action is play a card from your hand, but at the beginning of the game, you have no cards in hand. So the next thing you could do is actually buy a card from this market. And you see that there's these 12 cards out here, and they all have varying costs. Now, the furthest from the deck are going to be the cheapest. These are actually free cards that you can just pick up and use. They cost nothing, but it takes 1 action to pick one up. If you're to buy a second card from the market, it actually costs you 2 actions to buy a second card. So if you want to buy 2 cards, that's all you're going to do on your turn. 1 action to pick the first one, and 2 actions to pick the second one. That's your 3 actions. But if you buy a card, you're going to have to pay for it eventually. These cost 0, but as you move closer to the deck, the price goes up. So it's 0 for these 2, 1, 2, 4, 8, and 16 gold. Now you'll see you only start with 4, so you're not going to buy a 16 gold on the first turn. But you can buy any of these cards that you want. Most of the cards I showed you during the first part, you're going to go in your hand when you buy them. You'll see they have costs printed on them, 5, 6, 4, 0, 0, 7, this one's upside down, but 0, 6, and 9 here. And then you have this card over here that actually has a cost to play at the bottom, depending on where you play it. But some of these cards, the yellow ones here, are events that you play immediately when you buy them. They all have 2 sides to them I showed you earlier. One side does nothing, and the other one has an event that will likely change the regime of the game, and thus change the victory condition if they're toppled, and have some effect on everybody in play. So you can buy these cards, and you take them into your hand or play them immediately, and these go to a discard pile, which can change the economy, which I talked about. So maybe this player wants to buy a card. So 0, 1, 2, 4, the most expensive card they could buy is from this area. Maybe they want to buy this card, but then they wouldn't be able to play it because they wouldn't have the money to put it out. So they're going to look around and see what's useful to them, and they're going to buy cards maybe. But that's one thing you can do. The next thing you can do is you can play cards or buy public cards. There are 2 cards in the game that are available at all times to any player, but you'll see here they're very expensive. Cost $18 or $16 to buy this card, and they go directly into play. And some of them change the victory condition. This one changes it to martial law. This one is just a command point that you can buy straight out. And they have 2 sides. You can play them for either side. This one's a revolution point and causes some strife. And this one here is an outrage point and changes it to U.S. intervention. So those are always available to be bought and played immediately. In addition to that, as I said, you can play cards from your hand. So if you were to have any of these cards in your hand, you could pay the money and play them out. Now, the reason you want to play these cards out is, for example, the Enterprise here. If you were to have this one in your hand, you could pay the 7 money to play it out, and it's going to give you income equal to the current mine status of the regime. So you'll see Pax Porfiriana has a mines of 2. So 2 more of your cubes are going to go out here, and when you get to income, you're going to get 4 income instead of the 2 that you would originally get. Troops, for example, you want to play out on your own area to protect them, or if you played it on an opponent's, let's say that yellow is playing this on us, and they pay the foot cost, which is 0. They'd play it out on us, and it would remove one of our income cubes and place one of their income cubes on it. So they're kind of stealing some money from us. They're taking it off of us, and they gain the income instead of us. So that's the reason to play troops, or to protect yourself. Other things are going to generate more or less income. And if you upgrade the connection on a card, let's say I upgraded the connection from boots to trains by paying 7 money, a cube would go on there, and now I'm generating more income. So each time you place a cube onto a card, you're going to get more income. You can also sell cards from your hand, and when you sell a card, you get the current economy value. So you can take a card and buy it for 0 and immediately turn around and sell it using one of your actions for 3 money in this case. Or if it was a different regime, for example, if we were in martial law, it would only be 2. So the card value is going to change from time to time. You can move your troops around. So if yellow decided they no longer wanted this troop here, they could pay to move it somewhere else. They would simply pay the deploy cost of whatever type of movement was on that card and move that card to that spot. And if they were to take it off of here, green would get their cube back, and yellow would take theirs away, and this troop would move somewhere else. You can buy land. Now there are specific cards that are plantations. There's one other one, ranches, that you can buy land on. And the cost to buy land depends on how many cubes are already on that card. So let's just pretend that this mine is actually a plantation. If they wanted to buy a land for this, they would spend 2 actions and they would pay 2 gold to put another cube out on here, which would increase its income. When they do this, you can see that they can continue to do this, but it's going to get more and more expensive if they do so. It's also a good idea to do this before you upgrade a connection cost on a plantation, because now there are 3 cubes on here and you have to pay 3 cubes for your first upgrade of land, purchasing more land for that card. You can, as I already showed you, upgrade connections, which is an action. So you simply pay the cost to change the connection, which changes how much it costs to get troops there. Different types of troops will have different costs. You can do what's called a police action, and police actions are related to things that happen from these event cards, which you can play on your opponent or on yourself in order to try and get the victory points. Like I described earlier, these upside-down victory points go to whoever the victim is, and you can victimize yourself in order to earn victory points. Sometimes it's worth it to take the negative effects of these cards in order to get the victory point. But this one says here that you pay nothing, and you can steal 3 money from your opponent and place 2 unrest on one of their cards. So let's say that yellow played this on my mine. They would steal 3 money from me, so they'd take that and give it to themselves, and they would put 2 unrest. Now, the red chips, which are 5 money, also represent unrest. They would go on my card. At this point, the unrest does not exceed the cubes on the card, but if it were to, my card would be destroyed. Now, in addition, this also says transfer an income cube from an opponent's ranch in Chihuahua to your plantation or ranch. So it would let me steal an income cube and transfer it over, and it would change the regime to Pax Porfiriana if it wasn't already. This card would get awarded to me because I was the target, and I would put it in a pile of victory points. And if revolution ever came around, this would count as 1 revolution point towards me winning. In addition, this card that now has unrest on it is useless for me to use. I cannot generate any income from it while it's like this, and I can't use any effects on it. And if a connection were upgraded, it would automatically be downgraded while the unrest was on here. But you can take a police action to remove unrest. And what that does is you can pay 3 money to remove 1 unrest from a card. Or you can pay, if the regime is correct, or if you have troops there, it actually costs you nothing to remove 1 unrest. If anybody has troops here, even your opponent's troops, you can use the police action to remove 1 unrest for free. In addition, if you are jailed, which is an effect that can happen through the game, you can pay money to remove the jailed effect. And what jailed does is it actually reduces the number of actions you get per turn to 2. So you'll want to get rid of that effect as soon as possible. The final action you can do is what's called speculating. Speculating means that you put one of your cubes on one of these cards, not the 0 cards, but one of these other cards, and if your opponent buys this card, they pay you instead of the bank. So you're going to take your 3 actions on your turn, trying to find ways to generate money, trying to get ways to get victory points, be it playing events or playing troops out in front of you that provide victory points. You can play the partners that provide victory points. A lot of different cards provide a lot of different victory points. And when you're done with your turn, you're going to do a couple things. First thing, you're going to go ahead and you're going to shift all these cards down. So they're going to get cheaper as they sit out here longer. And then you're going to flip 2, 3, 4, 5. You're going to flip new cards out to fill the spots that have been taken. So you'll see cards will shift down. In addition, before you do that, you're actually going to take any event cards that are in the 0 area and remove them from the game. They don't happen, they just get set aside, and everything would shift to fill their spots. So you'll see if event cards aren't bought and used, they're going to go away without anything happening. Anyhow, after you've slid all of these cards, you're going to get your income, which for this player, since they're still on rest on this card, would be 1, 2, and they would take that money to the bank, or to their own little area, generating more money for them to use on their next turn. Now, you're going to keep doing this, trying to earn victory points until you get to a topple card. And they are quite a ways down in this deck. There's 6 stacks in this that are topped on top of each other, and there's only a topple card in the last 4 stacks. So you'll sift through for a while. You'd be playing, gathering victory points, trying to plan out, until you got to a topple card. So let me find one here. There we go. This topple card would eventually come into play in one of these spots as the deck was filled out. And if someone was to buy this topple card from whatever position it's in, it's going to immediately topple that government, as I said during the introduction. And you're going to check and see if there's a victory based on the conditions on the other side of the card of whatever regime it currently is. So you'd look and see, okay, right now, whoever has loyalty equal to 2 plus the lowest 2 opponents, or in a 2-player game, it's going to be 3 plus the points of your opponent. If you have that many victory points in that type, you're going to be the winner. Otherwise, you're going to keep playing the game in this manner until somebody does manage to win one of these victory conditions, or you get to the last topple, and then whoever has the most gold will be the winner of Pax Porfiriana. Well, there you have it. That is Pax Porfiriana by Sierra Madre Games. As you can tell, very complicated in card interactions. There's a lot going on there, and it's very difficult to cover in a streamlined manner in a video so short. Now, the things I like about the game are many and varied. One is that I like the 4 different victory point conditions. You're constantly trying to gauge which one of these 4 victory point situations you should be going for. Do you want to try and hold off on maybe loyalty victory points, thinking that the Pax Porfiriana regime isn't going to change before the topple card comes out? Or do you want to diversify in victory points, trying to get as many of each kind as possible, or at least enough in each kind as possible, to prevent your opponents from winning if the topple does come around? Do you want to focus on getting a lot of gold, thinking that in the higher number player games, maybe you won't have a successful toppling, no one will win any of the topples, and you'll need money at the end of the game? Do you want to have a lot of troops trying to steal stuff from other players, or do you want to try and protect your own things so that you don't get extorted by troops? There's a lot to decide in this game, a lot of different ways you can try and go about things, a lot of different actions you can take, and that makes it very interesting. Now, for players who have difficulty with hard rules or a little bit convoluted rule sets, a lot of small things to remember, this isn't going to be a game you're going to like. It has a Glory to Rome kind of feel with a lot more strategic depth to it, or a lot more, maybe not strategic depth, but a lot more variety in what happens in the game. The theme isn't my favorite, but that's not really important. I think the mechanics behind the game are great. I think it really makes a great complex tableau game, makes it feel like a heavier tableau game, an area that I didn't exactly have filled before, and is all around just a very good game. So if you're looking for something towards the heavier end of a card game, I'd say very heavy for a card game, you should definitely check out Pax Porfiriana from Phil Ekland and Sierra Madre Games.
Thanks for watching our review today. For more information about board games, as well as the #1 board game audio podcast, check out Dicetower.com for reviews, interviews, and more. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower.